Hi and welcome. In this video we're going to briefly summarize the course that we're about to enter into and talk about some of these things that we talked about in the welcome video in a little bit more detail. Android apps, first and foremost, are different than other mobile systems. An Android application, like other mobile device systems, consists of components. There are two basic types of components. There is the activity and the service. Activities are user activities, the basic unit of user interaction as they're defined by Android itself. Activities are the places where you see the user interface, you have the controls, and the user actually interacts with your application. And then there are services. And services are places in which the background processes are run. These services can also contain methods for later invocation. And this is called a bound service, and we'll talk about that in quite a bit of detail when we get to services. However, even though Android applications contain components just like other mobile systems, these components are sort of loosely bound. In some mobile environments, an application contains its components, and then another application contains its components, and so on and so forth. In an Android application, we can get components from other applications, and we can also share our components with other applications through something called an intent binding. An Android application is kind of a loose collection of components, and users may even be migrating from one application to another, and use this part of this application, and there can be great complexity in what a user is actually doing, but the users see this as moving through these multiple apps. They see this as a seamless process. They are doing one task, as it's referred to in Android. So what about these components? Components are joined up or glued together through something called an intent in Android. And this word intent is used just to refer to that there is an intent by the user to perform an activity, or there is an intent by the developer to run a service. An intent invokes an activity or a service, but it can also carry data to be used by that activity or service that it invokes. We can also return data from a component back to the calling activity, or even calling service if we get into that level of detail. But the return of that data is also conducted through an intent. So another thing that is important in the component model is that Android, the system itself, defines many components that we can use, like timers and clocks and so on and so forth. And these are also accessed from our application through intents. We also use databases quite a bit in Android. Rather than keeping our data in flat files, oftentimes we'll use SQLite 3, which is a relational database management system, or RDBMS. I forgot the B, didn't I? Well, that's all right. We can set up databases and we can access them directly through activities, and we use very simple helper classes. So it's very simple in Android to set up a database. We can also set up an application to provide data from a database to other applications. And we can also get data from other applications, like the calendar application or the contacts application, and we get these through something called a provider. And in more advanced usage in our own applications, we can write providers to provide data to other applications. In modern mobile app development, it is extremely important to be able to play audio and video and to get these files and move them around. Android makes this process extremely simple in our applications. And of course, depending on the level of control, we can even pause and stop and start and compress and do a lot of different things. We have a variety of classes in Android that are defined, of course, using Java to choose from to do audio and video playback. Android allows access to the Google Play Store from within applications, and that would allow in-app purchase for updates for your own apps. We can even access the Google Play Store in a general way. Now, in this course, we're going to be talking about Google Play in the context of, as a developer, how do I get my app up to the App Store, and how do I monetize it, and how do I make a page that users will see so that it is enticing to them for them to download and actually, of course, pay for my application. As we get started with the course, I would begin with the installation video, which is, of course, how to install the Android development environment. Work through the examples in each unit, and especially pay attention to the Hello World example, because the Hello World example is going to be your entry into starting with activities. And as you're looking at these examples, don't be afraid to change things. Get into the code, dig around, and make it your own. Experiment. That is often the best way to learn. If it blows up, you didn't blow up the world, you just blew up your code. Fix it. And by doing that and iterating through that process, you will learn more about this than I can ever teach you. As you experiment, remember that classes, each class, you should confine that to one idea or one task or one basic concept. And don't be afraid to have a lot of classes in your application. The only problem can happen, of course, when you have too few classes that are doing too much work. And also, abundantly keep the user in mind. Make the app simple to use, no matter how, in fact, complex it is. Keep it simple for the user, because Android is really a user-driven experience more than any other. And the process of developing for Android keeps the user focus in mind. This is why the components are loosely bound in applications. So as you're developing, keep that user in mind. And how is the user going to not only use components of your application, but services provided by the Android system itself? What do they want to do as they're working through the process of learning your application? Thank you very much.